I'm Stina. I'm a curator and art strategist, and I work with art and blockchain. I've found myself in this space since 2019. I come from the traditional art world, and my major was in public art, memory in public art, and my current research topic has kind of merged where I am right now and where I came from. So I am here to talk about site specificity and locational identity in art online, a little bit more specifically public art online, and how we can maybe consider these two quite physical notions in something that is more up in the cloud. So I guess it's quite good to start with what the public is, and how does it actually relate to the internet. When I talk about this, I usually talk about two types of publics, as in two categories, sometimes more, but I think in this setting it works quite well with two. So the first one, of course, is a type of space, a physical space that we move in. It might be on our way to work, from work, where we spend our time during weekends, and it sometimes seems that the public space is quite straightforward, that it's something that is public, something that we move in, maybe even something that's owned by the public. But it is actually a little bit more complicated than that. UK, for example, doesn't necessarily really have, if you consider public, doesn't really have a public space, because actually all land that's not owned by a private person is actually owned by the crown, aka the king now. So basically there is no 100% public space, arguably. But we also tend to think very, limited around public space. This, for example, is what ChatGPT considers to be public space. According to this one, there should be a fountain, there should be a flower bed, playground, a bench, food truck apparently is also really important. And then, of course, the famous sculpture, which I find really, really, really interesting, because this also implies that public art is something that is, in fact, very static. It is there, it's placed, it stays, it represents whatever time indefinitely, it will be there forever. I'm going to come back to this idea of staticness in public art in just a minute, but I think just this kind of idea of the sculpture as a public piece is where we are right now, a lot of us, when we think about public art. So back to the two categories. The other group is a group of people that are participating in the art. This public doesn't necessarily, as you see, focus on the actually physical space, but then actually the group of people which the art in the space might be for. And one of the really good examples of this is where the piece is for a very specific group of people, is by Krzysztof Wojciechowski. Wojciechowski has been working with these kind of projection pieces in the public for a really, really long time. This one is from 1998, and just a side note around crypto, I've seen there's been a lot of discussions in terms of how digital art can physically change public spaces, and they're always being presented that this is something that's happening for the first time right now. It is not. This has been going on for a really long time. The interesting thing with Wojciechowski's pieces is that they're always temporary. They're interventions, and they're basically set on old monuments who were maybe put in the space to remember a time that is not any longer. This piece, for example, is on Bunker Hill Monument, which is the most famous public monument in Boston, and it's commemorating the fight of freedom during the American Revolution. A lot of Americans nowadays, or in 1998, wouldn't necessarily connect to this. So what he did was that he took the contemporary setting of that area, Bunker Hill, which suffered from a lot of violence, recorded videos of mothers and young men who'd lost a son, brother, friend due to this violence, and projected them onto this monument. This happened over the course of 3 days, and basically changed an outdated monument into a contemporary one, which represented the public who was moving in that space. So back to this idea of static versus temporary, and the idea of the sculpture as something that exists within a public space. Like I said, what I find interesting with Wojciechowski's Bunker Hill Monument projection is that it was temporary. It was never meant to stay static or to be for a long time. It was always meant to be for 3 days. And what it served as was a contemporary witness of contemporary history that was happening in that space right now. And then, of course, we come to the contemporary society, and I think we should ask ourselves, is static art suitable for society that evolves constantly? Are we able to represent our society by placing sculptures, monuments, etc. out in society, or do we need to think about it a little bit more fluidly, as society is evolving very quickly? So when you think about it, maybe temporary interventions might serve our society actually better, because they can, of course, adapt more quickly, and as a result, and of course also respond to societal changes. We are definitely not a static society, as we know, and this just makes me think that the public art that we see today needs to be more fluid. So what does that have to do with the internet then? The internet is a public space. We move in this public space every day. And to kind of put this into context, I want to quote Mallory Okusan-Nesam, from her piece on collective visibility. So this piece is dealing directly in terms of how do you represent minority groups on monuments that are outdated and are not longer serving society. She writes, public space is like this water that we wade through every day, and we're always absorbing something, always exchanging. And I do find this quote extremely true, and I think public space is one of these rooms, areas, spaces that we move through without maybe considering what we actually get from it, but also what we give to it. We tend to go through these spaces every day, especially if you live in a big city. You tend to move outside. If you move outside your flat, you definitely move in a public space. And when we do, we are always absorbing something, because we overhear a conversation, we see someone do something, but we're also giving things away. We might be on our phone, and we might have some other people listening to us, and therefore we are, of course, exchanging at the same time as we are absorbing. And that is basically what the internet is. We are on the internet every day. I know I am. I'm very guilty of that, of actually being on the internet, and I've basically been totally disconnected for a week 5 years ago. That's the last time I was totally disconnected from the internet. Sounds very bad now when I say it out loud, but I think especially if you work in an industry that we do as well, which is of course internet-based, we're just naturally on the internet. And of course, the communities that we see in the squares, we also see online. We are always absorbing something. As soon as you go on Twitter, you're absorbing something. But also as soon as you go on Twitter and maybe tweet, you're also exchanging something. And to get back to these communities, I think the blockchain community has an extremely strong kind of identity on a platform like Twitter, and therefore we are even more prone to having this absorbing and exchanging on a daily basis. We all know that Web3, blockchain, etc. is happening on Twitter and Orb and all of the other new ones as well now, but it's a social media where we give things away at the same time as we are taking things in. So then back to these ideas online and maybe how this translates to pieces online. So specifically site-specific installations for the internet. And this was done in 2013 by Latoba Avedon. They started a space, I guess you can call it, called Panther Modern. And it was a space online for artists to create site-specific installations for the internet. They invited a group of artists that could basically create whatever they wanted, as long as it was site-specific for the internet. That was the only kind of idea they wanted to have present within this. Claudia Hart, which is a part of Web3, digital art, NFT space, she was invited, and when I spoke to her about it, she also said that there was basically no boundaries whatsoever. She really felt like they could do whatever they wanted. This was back in 2013, so 11 years ago, I guess. She also invited her students from the 3D and VR course from School of Art Institute of Chicago to collaborate with Avedon on this, and they did rooms as well. They got a 3D model from them, and they basically went from there. And now let's see. So this is basically the space that Avedon created, and they gave a room to each artist. The space, or the website worked this week. I didn't get any images. I was going to get images this morning, and the website is not working, of course. The website should be up. So if you want to go and have a look at it, it's panthermodern.org. No. Sorry, there we go. So this is just a layout of kind of what the space ended up to be. And I think this is, pieces like this on the internet is always very interesting because it becomes very much of a gallery thing, but maybe arguably any kind of art that exists on the internet is public because you can always access it, and that's why I wanted to bring it in. And then, of course, we also have interventions, which I talked about a little bit before, static versus temporary, and I think interventions on the website as public art is something that is more suitable for the medium in general. I think static pieces are important, but like I said, I think maybe it just serves the current version of society a little bit better if they're temporary. So I'm going to start to look at Jonas Lund's piece, I Stare at My Computer Waiting for Something to Happen, which was done in 2020. It was a temporary intervention on Heck's website, and he was commissioned to do it during the pandemic. And this is what he made. So basically what it was that if you went on the website, your cursor left a little trail. You could see the stars or whatever it is, the yellow dots is basically his cursor on the website. And of course, if there was many people on the website, you saw all of them. So basically what it was a way for people to feel less alone. And this is a quote from his website. Most of the days of the lockdown, I just stare at my computer waiting for something to happen. For people who are used to working at home, it shouldn't be a big difference, but it feels completely different. I wonder if more people feel this way, if we were all connected through this moment. What if I could see you move when I move? So basically, he did not want to do a piece about the pandemic, but somehow it still ended up being about the loneliness that we all felt just staring at our computers. And this made their website kind of a space where people met, even though if you weren't in the same room, you were there all together when you saw the other cursor moving around. And yet again, this was never meant to be a static piece. This was always meant to be a temporary one that was recorded over a few days. And then the second intervention I want to look at as well is, again, by Latoba Avedon. They made a piece on the Witness website 2021, which was called Morning Mirror, Evening Mirror. They were, again, commissioned by Whitney to do a so-called intervention, and this ran over 7 days in 2021. And we got a video. We should have a video. Do we? Internet's being a little bit slow. We all work with the internet, but it never works, right? Here we go. Maybe it's just better for me to... So basically what it was is that at sunrise and sunset, there was a little video that popped up on the Whitney website. And if you were there, you saw it, but if you weren't there, you didn't see it. And again, it became kind of this shared experience within a public space, even though you weren't in the same room together. It ran for 7 days, and it's, yeah, small animations that popped up like this, like you can see this oval visual on the website. I would love to show it to you, but it seems like it's taking a very long time to load. Let's give it a go again. Ah, there we go. Resolution is normally better. So, and they all range from 10 to 30 seconds, so it wasn't a long thing, it was very temporary, and they popped up, and basically if you saw it, you saw it. If you didn't see it, maybe you caught it next day. Yeah, okay. So both these examples are a shared, make websites a shared space that you share with other people only by chance, and you had to visit the website to experience it. A little bit like public art can be in a physical space, I guess. Few people will actively go and seek out public art. I am one who will do it, but there's big groups in society who will not do it and stumble upon these pieces by a happy accident. And in a way, these pieces became exactly that. It was a happy accident. You were on the website, great, you saw it, and you would maybe tell someone, a friend about it, that you should actually go and see it. And of course, I mean, it is, I guess, in a way, very physically bound because it's a website, but I guess art needs to be bound to something in a way. But it also was a little bit of site specificity as a state of mind. Like I said, they were both on a website, but it also kind of put the viewer, emphasized on the feeling that the viewer was left in, especially Jonah's piece, I think. I just stared at my computer waiting for something to happen. It was during the pandemic, and I think everyone felt an extremely loneliness, and maybe this kind of shared moment both emphasized the loneliness, but also took a little bit of that loneliness away, kind of emphasizing of the mindset rather than the website, but also the space that you shared, simply because you were put in this mindset of not being alone. And then, of course, we need to go in. We're on a blockchain week, so we need, of course, to cover blockchain as a site space for site specificity as well. I'm not really going into it that deep, because I think Sam Hart, who presented this morning, did an extremely well, had an extremely amazing presentation in terms of what blockchain might be as an art medium, but I also know that Sarah is going to touch upon site specificity after me, so I'll leave it. But I think it's interesting to think about it from the point of view that art that's created on the point of on the blockchain is of course tied to a very specific point of time, but also a space, aka a blockchain. And in a way, I would almost say that it brings us back to a little bit of the conversations of site specificity in the 1960s, where artists such as Richard Serra claimed that if you were to move a site-specific piece from its site, the piece would not be existing any longer. It would not be the piece that it was intended to be. Evangelists within the space sometimes claims that pieces can only exist on certain blockchains, and I guess that's kind of the conversation here again. If it's on Ethereum, the piece will exist. If it's not on Ethereum, it might not exist. So then, I guess, what is public art online? Is there even public art online, or is it just simply art in the public? I want to bring it back to this quote again, because I think it kind of says a lot about maybe how we need to think about the public and how we need to think about the internet as a public space. We do exist a lot on the internet, and I think that we need to take a step away from the public being physical and more think about it in a more ephemeral way. It's something quite elusive out there as well. And of course, I don't know if we need to define it actually, public art online. I think maybe we have the luxury of being a little bit more fluid about it. And like I said, Richard Serra was very clear about what site specificity was, but we're actually now in the that was in the 1960s, and I think we can maybe take a step away from that. So maybe we might need to think about it a little bit more like this, the internet of public art, or the internet for public art, or the internet as public art. And this is a quote which I read this morning by Christopher Ørum. And he generated it as a joke, but I think it's actually quite interesting from the point of view of art existing on a blockchain and art on the internet. Our legacy lies not in the stone monuments, but in the data sets and the algorithms. And maybe we just need to start to cherish them a little bit more and see them as pieces and as the legacy that we leave behind, which might potentially be considered public pieces in the future. Thank you.